Good evening and welcome to the school committee meeting tonight on Wednesday, April 27th, 2022. I'd like to call to order our special school committee meeting at 7 p.m. If we could all stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. And if our clerk, Ms. Kayla Biagioni-Smith, can start with the pledge.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
So I'd like to welcome our Ms. Darcy Fernandes. She's here from Ethel, Royalson Regional School District, here for interview for our superintendent position that's open. I'd like to say thank you so much for visiting our district today. For those who may be watching who don't realize it, you spent the entire day in our district today from 8:30 a.m. You met with teachers, students, faculty, community members, and thank you very much. It was a long day. And we have for you the questions in front of you if you need to reference them at all. We all have 2 questions for you that we put together ahead of time. Our goal is to keep this around 1 hour and 15 minutes. If we have time after that, we'd like to maybe have some open-ended questions or give you an opportunity for some other things. I'd also like to make our announcement, which is the April 27, 2022 special school committee meeting will be recorded and will be posted on the district's website at the conclusion of the 4 interviews for superintendent. Under the open meeting law, the public is permitted to make an audio or video recording of an open session at a public meeting. At this time, I would ask if anyone is recording tonight's meeting to please identify themselves. And seeing nobody, I'll move forward. And Ms. Fernandes, if you'd like to just share a little bit with us about yourself that you'd like us to know.
Well, first, it's been my pleasure to be here all day. It really has been. I've enjoyed speaking to staff, speaking to students, and what I've come to realize very quickly is people are very happy here, and that was nice to hear and see. As I start tonight, I hope I'm not being repetitive. I know some of you have heard from me, but I want to make sure I give kind of the whole overview. So if it gets to be too much, just let me know. I started out my career at Rivers Country Day. If you're not familiar with that, it's a private school in Weston. It was at a time in Massachusetts where finding a public school position was like trying to find a needle in a haystack. But I enjoyed my 2 years there. What I learned very quickly was what rigor looks like in the classroom, because many of our students were accelerated, and I had to be at my top game as a teacher there. I then left because I got the opportunity to work in my hometown. I taught there for 13 years. While I was there, not only was I a social studies teacher, I was also the coordinator of the after-school program, parent liaison, and a department person for social studies within the district. When I was in Wareham, I had the opportunity to become a coach for community service learning as part of the school district. I'm happy to say while I was there, we were honored as a national leader school for community service learning. I was also given an award as Teacher of the Year for community service learning and was a semifinalist for the state of Massachusetts as a teacher. I then left Wareham and became an assistant principal in Brockton. I was an assistant principal for 6 months, and then my principal got sick, and I became the interim principal of that building for 2 years. My major charge there was, number 1, putting together the junior high model and moving to the middle school model. And so I was responsible for rescheduling all of the schools, putting in place common planning time, putting in place advisor, advisee, getting teachers to understand data cycle and intervention. By the time I left, all of the schools and middle schools in Brockton had converted to, all junior highs, excuse me, had converted to middle schools. I also housed the behavior program for the district for middle schools there, and part of my role was to try to figure out how to stabilize that program. I then left there and got a permanent principal's position in New Bedford at Royalson, that's where I'm at now, at Roosevelt Middle School. Just about 1,000 students there. We had the ELL program there, the behavior program there, and the autistic program there, along with general ed. And a big part of my job was kind of to coalesce everybody together because they were having a difficult time and really figuring out a way to make the ELL program feel like home for students. While there, I started what we call the Amigo Center, which was a parent center. We worked in partnership with the Immigrants Assistance Center to open that up, which allowed families to kind of have a middleman to work with to understand and navigate the schools. In addition to that, we started a pre-college program for students where they were able to get connected with Bridgewater State College, actually spend 2 weeks on the college campus living there. And the only criteria for getting in was your willingness to want to be there. And so every year we had 150 kids on campus. The combination of professors and the teachers from the school district worked together to create this program and offer the classes. I was the one who designed the program, which was a hands-on program for kids. We had everything from aeronautics to rocketeering to literacy and graphics to robotics, and it was just a lovely program. And we had kids who had special ed diagnoses, behavior diagnoses, general ed, accelerated, all as part of the program. And it went very, very well. And another part of the program, which I didn't talk much about, was parent engagement, to understand kind of how to get their child ready. So as part of the program, we brought parents on campus every week and gave them orientation and understanding, how do you get your kid into college? How do you finance it? How do you navigate the day-to-day of what your child's going to need to know? And so that was a big part of the program as well. And we actually bussed the parents up so it wasn't a barrier for them to get on campus and see it. From there, I left and I became an assistant superintendent of teaching and learning in Randolph Public Schools. I was there 4 years. My major focus was curriculum design and making sure that across the district we had alignment with curriculum, and that across the district we had a data decision-making process which allowed us to really understand where were the gaps that students had and what do we put in place as far as interventions to fix them. This was a big part of the work, really required me to work very closely with the Director of Special Education because we had some intervention programs that were designed for general ed, and then we had some that were designed for kids with certain disabilities to make sure they could access the curriculum. And so we worked very closely together to put together that design. From there, I left and went to Ethel, Royalson, where I have been for the last 5 years as superintendent. That particular district has a lot of challenges, but I was able to work through each and every one of them, one at a time. And a big part of my process was really working with the community in creating a strategic plan that everybody would buy into, and setting specific goals around that. So our first goal in the district is academic rigor, and focusing on that and making sure that's a part of what happens in the classrooms. Our second focus is on social emotional learning and ensuring that kids feel like they belong within the district and are connected and feel like who they are can be expressed on a day-to-day basis. And the third part of our strategic plan now is around family engagement and ensuring that our families and our community feel connected to the school. We launched this year a family center, which is open and allows our parents to have, again, a group of people to connect with. It also has its own food pantry in it, and that is housed in our high school. And that particular center works really hard to make families feel like they can belong and be part of the district. So parents often connect with them before even the school's now to be connected. And as part of it, branched out are parent liaisons that work at every building. So when we're in a situation where we feel like a child needs extra intervention, support, the liaisons are the first ones after the teachers to talk to the family and explain why this is important. They come in and sit down with them. They'll meet with the parent, with the teacher, and build that understanding. And that's been very helpful, because what we found is, especially with schools, sometimes parents are in fear of schools because of the experience they had in the past. And we have to break that barrier. And this is one of the ways we've done that, by hiring somebody who is a parent and works in the community with them day to day. And we're really seeing that's starting to work. The other thing we've done is we've put in health centers in our schools. So right now, if you went into ACES, you would not only have the school nurse, you would also have a certified nurse practitioner. So if I have medical issues, I can actually get an appointment with the certified nurse practitioner in the school, get my prescriptions from her, and get taken care of. And so parents have the choice as to whether to sign up for it or not. And we also provide, besides the mental health services we provide through guidance and adjustment, we have mental health people who are in our building, some who come in and actually work directly with the child, and others who go via Zoom. And the way we were able to put that into place is we work directly with Haywood Hospital. And we created the program. And in the process of creating the program, the wonderful thing is there's no cost to the families. So if you have to access the services, there's no cost for you to do that. They do medical billing through the parents' insurance to make it happen. And we've had great success in that area. Very excited about that. The other thing is we have seen our accountability numbers go up in every single school. So we have proven that the structures we've put into place are working and more students are learning than ever before in Ethel Royalson. I have made a decision to move on for Ethel Royalson. I'm just going to be honest with you. One of the most difficult things for me has been that in 2018 we had a situation with our girls basketball team. And in the process of that situation, there was an investigation, a civil rights investigation that took place due to a comment that was made at the basketball game. There was a finding that our students did, one of our students did in fact say it. We couldn't prove who it was because several of the kids had the same number on the team. That caused a schism. Parents were upset. They felt as though I shouldn't have responded. I shouldn't have done anything. I should have just kind of been quiet about it. But under the law, I have to investigate. And I did not do the investigation. We have a civil rights officer who does the investigation for that. And she worked closely with our school lawyer, and they're the ones who found the finding. It was just my responsibility to report out what the finding was. But what's happened is there's been some rockiness with that, and we have not necessarily seen eye to eye as to where the school district's going to move from this point on. Equity has been a big focus of ours, and now several of these parents who are on the basketball team are now on the school committee, and they want to go in a different direction. And I picked Ethel Royalson because the goals that the community was looking at at the time were what I valued. They no longer are. And so for me to continue in a superintendency in that way doesn't make sense to me. When I look particularly here at what you were looking for your school district, it spoke to me. The notion and understanding of rigor is something I've always believed in. This understanding of celebrating difference and connecting with kids is something that I believe in. This whole inclusion model piece, something I truly believe in. So seeing where the journey you want to take, I think is similar to my value system, and that's why I'm really interested in looking at and I want to say it right, Tewksbury. Did I get it right?
Tewksbury.
Tewksbury. I'm working on it. But I really, after seeing the kids today, talking to the adults today, it clearly is a friendly place. Kids said to me today, I said, what do you like about your school the most? And they said, our teachers really care for us. And I said, how do you know that? There's a lot of smiling here. And I heard it twice, not once, but twice. And every kid I asked was happy. There was not a single kid who felt like being here in this district was something they didn't like. And that to me was very positive. It says a lot for the work happening. Also, in talking to the staff, what they were asking for and what they needed, I thought was pretty reasonable. I didn't think it was out of the ordinary what they're looking for. And I thought we had in our conversation some good thought processes about how to work through some of the dilemmas that we're facing. And what I said is we really just got to sit down and come to some agreements together. It doesn't mean one gets everything and the other one doesn't. It means figuring out a middle road and connecting. And what I said was, if I started here as superintendent, the first thing I would want to do is a listening session throughout the district. I'd want to visit every school, talk to the teachers in groups with the union present with me, talk with the staff members, not just the teachers, talk with the students, and hear how are things going, what's working, what's not. And then from there, really put together a plan of action to work on some of those things that people are feeling that need some work. And I will say to you, I've never, ever been in a district where there isn't work that needs to be done. It's just what it is. And the goal is really to figure out a way to coalesce together to make it happen. And that was a big part of our conversation today. And teachers said, I'm tired. And part of the reason why they're tired isn't just about some of the things that's happened in this district. It's about the fact that we got hit with COVID for 2 years, right? And here I am, all of a sudden, I'm teaching one way, and then overnight the lights go off and they say, by the way, you got to do it a whole nother way. That's exhausted people. And so the other piece has to be some celebration points. How do we bring about some celebration of what's happening, what's going well? I mean, today, one of the things I loved was the new program that you have at the middle school where kids are doing hands-on science. They were actually building roller coasters. you could see the kids were engaged and they were excited about it, and they really wanted to be connected in that way. And you could hear it in what they were doing. And just simple things like after lunch, doing a walk around the quad seemed to be something the kids really liked. They were excited about getting out there and getting that breather. So I think there's been some real good thought in this district about how to begin to re-engage people and work with them. And if I was hired as superintendent here, my job would be to continue the journey, not to start it, because it's already been started, but to continue it and help the school committee with the staff build a great, not a great district, because you're already great, but outstanding district, so to move to that next step. I've had a chance to look at your data, and clearly kids are learning here. And clearly you're vested in your schools. I see the new building going up, which is beautiful. I've been in a couple of the other buildings that are in fairly new shape. And so the community understands that, and they're willing to put forth the funds. And that's half the battle. If you have a community who's vested in your school, it's going to make a huge difference for the success of kids. And so I'm very hopeful. And then the other thing is just social emotional learning. I've had an opportunity to really work in that area for quite a while. In my district, we've put in place Character Strong K through 12, which allows kids to really understand one another and have conversations about who am I, and what does that mean in relationship to who you are? How do we get along? That's all part of it. And we've also allowed the principals to really find out, for the context of their school, what else would work. So for each one of our buildings, there's something unique and different happening to help kids to belong and feel connected. So for example, 2 weeks ago, we showed Schindler's List at the high school because the kids wanted to know more about the Jewish community. So we showed it, and kids had circles to actually talk about what they heard, what they saw, and what they learned from it. And that's something at the high school that they have seen that they wanted, along with work in changing the mascot. The kids wanted it, we worked on it. And so for me, what's important is that I come in here not with a cookie-cutter plan, but a plan to listen, a plan to come to an agreement on what we're going to work towards, and then put it into actualization and show you from month to month how it's getting done, with the help of the teachers and the staff, not alone. I don't believe that my brain alone is going to make anything right. It's a combination of a lot of people.
Thank you so much.
No problem.
Thank you. So we have about an hour, and I will start. Our first question is Mr. Sullivan.
Great. Thank you, Mrs. Fernandes. As a lifelong resident, your words really hit home, mean a lot, because I agree. I think we have wonderful teachers, staff, people in the community. I hope sounds like you got a great sense of that today.
Oh, yes, absolutely.
And we have wonderful students, student athletes, extracurriculars, so it's very nice to hear your perception, and I really hope you enjoyed your day here in Tewksbury.
I absolutely did.
As we go into the questions, nothing here is intended to trick you. We're just trying to get a sense of, the candidates, and so I know the questions are in front of you. If you need a moment after someone asks a question, if you need to take a moment, just please let us know.
Sure.
We want you to feel as comfortable as possible. So one of our ongoing goals here in Tewksbury is to support our students in achieving to the best of their abilities. In light of the last 2 years, obviously, due to the pandemic and the learning loss and regression that we've seen, how would you support our students, both socially and academically, in reaching this goal and ensuring the best outcomes for all students?
I think first and foremost, now that we've got the masks off, to start bringing back the stuff that kids love. It's got to happen. So example, last month we had our first middle school dance in Ethel, Royalson, and the kids were just happy to have the opportunity to be in the gym doing line dancing or whatever it is. So I think we've got to work on that. We've got to ask the kids, what are some of those traditional things that we haven't been able to do that we need to do to bring in, to work through that process. I think the other thing we need to do is we've got to get a handle on where are our kids at? What is our assessment saying about where they're at academically? And then we have to have a plan to put into place intervention to help those kids who may be struggling. And what I mean by that is we have to be able to carve out in the day first time to teach the core curriculum, and also some time for remediation if necessary. And so what I mean by that is the way we work in Ethel is we have our regular core day, math, English, science, social studies. Then we have an intervention acceleration block, we call it. And at that particular time, what happens is kids who are struggling in a certain subject, they can go and get help, whether it's in math, English, science, or social studies. And kids who are working at or above grade level can get an acceleration class so that they can go in and actually work on something that will bring them to the next level of the grade, because we've got to work on both ends. What is not fair is to say we're going to put these resources here for kids who are struggling and not here for those kids who are ready to move on, because what we're seeing, particularly in MCAS, is sometimes we have a flat line with our kids who are already at grade level, and it's because we haven't spent time trying to put in place an acceleration program for them. And so a combination of kind of the core curriculum and then some time to either get intervention or acceleration, I think is going to be extremely important. But what's important is not just the time, but the understanding of the gaps. Because what we shouldn't be doing is just throwing kids in and going over everything. What we should know is where are the areas where they are struggling and providing them help in those areas. Because we may have some kids who just geometry is the only issue they're having. So we need to give them that time. In another area, it might be a set of kids who need help with fractions. So the way we work is we do a flood model. So what happens during that intervention time, special ed teachers, paras, flood into a certain space so that depending on the area of need for that child, there are several stations to work at to get what they need in that particular area. And there also could be an acceleration station for those kids who need to move forward. And within there, there's an adult presence to help the kids. So we really want to be thoughtful about that. That's one of the ways. The other way we can do it is within their own class time saying, okay, I've seen some districts, I think Worcester does this, Monday through Friday it's core curriculum. Monday through Thursday, core curriculum, Friday is intervention day. So when I go to my class on Friday, I'm working on intervention. So we would have to figure out what works for this district and how we go through that process, but that's gotta happen in order to get there. And what we've got to be vested in is ensuring that, again, we're working on their gap areas, because we don't want any kid to feel like I'm repeating a whole grade. That's not what needs to happen. It's what is the gap problem and how do we fix that gap problem. And what we do is once we start working on the gap, we retest the child. Are they getting it now? If they are, I don't stay in that intervention any longer. I get to go to something else. Because if I don't understand fractions in the beginning, but I get it after 3 months, I shouldn't have to stay in that intervention program all year. And so we'll move them, and it might be they need help in something else, in which case we'll move them there or we'll move them to an acceleration program. So that intervention block really needs to be fluid, and I think that's important. The other thing that we've begun to do is look at high-intensity tutoring as a way to work through this process. So with our special ed students, for example, we offered every single parent in our district who had a special needs child last June a month of tutoring 3 times a week for an hour each day. And some of our parents took advantage of that. And so it was a Zoom session. They'd get online with the teacher. The teacher knew the gaps the kids had, and they worked with the kids in that particular area. And that was also helpful because our big issue was we didn't want learning loss. And when COVID hit, one of the problems we ran into to begin with is we had to everybody had to shut down in that first, March to the end of the year. And so some of our special needs students had learning gaps because, first of all, our district did not have one-to-one devices. So a lot of what we were doing was copying and pasting things and sending it out. And we also, at times, families didn't have the ability to get onto the phone and call and talk to the teacher, because what we realized was some of our families were doing minutes. And so I got 4 kids at home and I got minutes, and I'm trying to get a hold of the teacher and talk, it wasn't working. So we offered that at the end of the year for the families who needed it, and it really helped some of our kids to get back on board. We now have one-to-one devices for every student in our district, and so that's made a difference so that now we can do that tutoring from that perspective. So at ACES, for example, one of our schools that has some struggling students, we've given the teachers money, and we said if you have kids who are on the cusp who really need that extra help, make arrangements with the family to do tutoring sessions, and we've given them an account with a certain amount of money that they can draw from to work and do tutoring besides some of the after-school and intervention time. So that's all been part of it. Again, I would say to you, that's the model we're using there. I would need to understand your context here from a fiscal standpoint, from a body standpoint, to see what would work. But what I would want to do is work with the staff to figure out how would intervention work here and how could we provide that for the students to fill in those gaps.
Great, thank you.
And the next question is mine. How have you, or how do you plan to prioritize the district needs for all faculty with relation to specialized training and workshops that are applicable to their role and help them meet the instructional needs for all students?
Got it. We talked a little bit about this today with some of the staff, and when I talked about in Ethel, what we've done is we have what we call tracks now. So ultimately, as PD day comes along, you have 4 or 5 options that you as a staff member can choose from. So what we do is we have our goals for the district, which we've all agreed to, and so we provide PD in each of those areas, and you can decide which one you want. So right now we have social emotional learning as one. We have a group that's reading the book Cultural Proficiency in the Brain, and those teachers are signed on not only to do a book study, but also next year to be PD providers in that area. We also have a SEED cohort, which is a group of teachers who are really working to understand their own core beliefs and how that meshes with others. And they do that through what we call windows and mirrors. So we look at an experience and we talk about what is like this for me, what's part of my culture and my community, and what isn't, and what does that mean as far as the impact in the way in which I work with people. So people can choose to be part of that. We have Research for Better Teaching, which is kind of a foundational course that really takes teachers through the core elements you need to instruct. We really recommend that for our teachers who are in the first 3 years. And then the other class we have is called Rigor and in the classroom. And part of that course is very much about understanding the standards for the state and how you create acceleration for kids through entry points. And what that means is really understanding the kid's background and finding a way to connect to that child through what they already know. Because what brain research tells us is if you are going to learn something new, you have to have some contextual understanding from your own brain first. So how do we make that connection? So part of the course does that. The other part of the course looks at particularly, here is the end result standard we want to be at. How do I get my kids there? How do I journey through that? And how, if a kid has a disability, would that journey look like for them? Because what we realize with special education, there are 4 different types of really special needs that kids have. And you've got to understand each one and understand how you walk through the process with that child to get them there. So that's the other piece that we've put into place. And our teachers get to pick which one they're in. We have a couple of the PDs being provided by vendors. We have a couple of the PDs being provided by our own teachers who we sent out to get trained. So for example, SEED is taught by one of our adjustment counselors in the district. Our Rigor course is being taught by 3 coaches in our district who work very closely with RBT to understand that, but they were originally classroom teachers, and they are under the union. And next year we're continuing that. But I think what has to happen, we say part of what we do with inclusion is to ensure that everybody gets the individual needs met. We have to do the same thing with our teachers. Besides that, we also offer additional PD for teachers if they want to specialize in something. So I've got some teachers who are, Ms. Fernandes, I really want to dig more deeply into this data decision-making process. So we've sent them on to a course at Harvard. We have a set of teachers who really talk to us about technology integration in the classroom. So they are now providing professional development to our staff in that area, and because they've already gone and taken coursework, and teachers now can go after school and get paid to actually take part in that. But they came to us and said that was something they needed, and we found a way to include that as part of our professional development. So not only do we have professional development that's scheduled every month, we also have common planning time, and then we have what we call paid time. So all of that is part of the dynamic so that we can offer multiple things. And then with some of our specialized people, we just say, what do you need? And we'll pay for a day for them to be off to go and get that. So like some of our teachers, like, this has been wonderful, but I really want to understand new modalities in using plastic, or, okay, find the thing, send it to me. So I put aside a pool of money to allow that to happen for those people who are specialized so they get connected. We do that with our school nurses. They go to a conference every year on school nursing, but we try to make sure we diversify enough so that everybody feels like they got something that year that connects to their individual needs.
Great, thank you so much. So we're about 45 minutes left, and Mr. Parsons, your next question.
So what have you done in your current district or past experience to make your special education department work better? Have you looked at ways to contain costs? And have you balanced the needs of students with the fiscal responsibilities of the schools?
Sure. First of all, what we've done is, when I got there, we had to put together a system. And that system had to include a continuum of services. And let me explain what I mean by that. First and foremost, if a child is struggling in a classroom, there has to be a team of people who come together and talk about how to solve that problem. That is not special ed. That's general ed. And so what we've done is we've put together what we call Cst Teams. And those Cst Teams actually meet. So when a teacher says, Johnny isn't making it, he's having a difficult time, they go to the Cst team, and together they come up with interventions that they can do in the classroom with the child for that to work. And they propose those pieces. So it might be more Title I services. It might be a particular instructional method that the teacher needs to learn to do that. It might be break time for the child, whatever it is. And so we put a plan together under the Cst team, and we monitor that over a period of 6 weeks to see if we start to see a change with the child. If we do, we continue down that line. So that keeps from a child going into special ed who doesn't need to go into special ed. What people have to understand is that we have a lot of services in schools that are not special ed that can service children. Title I is one of them. Guidance and school adjustment counselors are another. And so what are the resources that we have, and how can we channel students into that? So that Cst team is a critical process. So a child can't get to a referral even until they go through the Cst team, and they've documented that they've tried all of these things and they don't work. There's actually a manual out there called the Prim Manual, and it's about this thick with all the interventions you can put into place depending on the individual need of the child. So we use that as a resource when we have those meetings to kind of look through and say, have you tried this? Have you tried that? As a way to get there. Then once that happens, if we're still not seeing success, then the child will be referred for testing for special needs. And once they are tested and if they are accepted, what happens is we monitor their scores. Because if a child is meeting, we want to say, do we need to continue these services? And oftentimes people think it's a lifetime sentence. Once you get an IEP, it's not. So if we get a child in and they're starting to achieve, then we start thinking about paling back those services. So for example, we had one young lady and the mother said, I want her still in reading support. I said, ma'am, your child is now reading at grade level. We filled the gap. We fixed it. We don't need to continue with those services. But we don't do that unless we have data to prove it to be true and we see the academic success. So we're never going to say to a parent, we're taking away your IEP for your child, unless we can demonstrate or show that they are actually at a place where it can begin to teeter back. But they are then monitored for 6 months to make sure they are continuing success. And if they're not, we put them right back on. But that has to be part of the process. And what we've got to understand is that special ed is fluid. It's not a label for life. And for some kids, they need it. They need it for the long term. Others, that's the case. The other thing that we do is we're really looking at building in-house programs and trying to bring kids back into our district. So for example, right now we have 4 students with behavioral diagnoses, and we've sent them out to 4 different placements at a cost for the district about $350,000. So we talked about it the other day. I just hired 2 behavior teachers to work in our district, and we're bringing the kids back at a cost of $150,000 versus $350,000. So what we also like to do is look at those programs and figure out if we can consolidate them. At my last district, one of them was around kids who were hearing impaired. And so we brought in a program that was hearing impaired at a lot less money in-house than sending them out. Same thing with our artistic program in New Bedford. We brought the kids were being outside placed, and we brought in, worked with a psychologist who really understood autism. He came in and spent 6 months training the staff. They literally went to his office and got trained. Once they were done, we then brought the program into my building and introduced the students in there. So at the front end, it cost us more money. But once we brought the kids in, we started saving $300,000 a year. So within the next 3 years, we had made up that money and more. And so that's what we try to look at is how do we consolidate some programs down. But one thing I will tell you, we don't bring back programs unless we have people who are trained to do them. What I don't believe in is, we're just going to put the program in and we'll figure it out as we go along. That doesn't work. You really have to have the training for that specialized cohort of kids before doing that. But we have to really look at that to redesign programs. But that's the way in which you bring kids back in. You don't get rid of their services. You find a way to make it part of the district so that they can be in-house at a much more cost-effective place. Because where you spend a lot of money in special ed is, look at the transportation costs. Transportation costs alone are out of this world. Whereas if you're just bringing them to that building, you've just saved $100,000 just because you're not traveling them an hour down the street. And so even that makes a difference. So it's really looking at what would be the cost to have a similar program here versus sending them to outside placement as a way to control some of the funding.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay, and Ms. Biagioni-Smith?
Thank you. So I do want to say real quick, I know you said the kids got excited when they were in the quad. I think it's the courtyard. My daughter, that is her favorite part of the day.
Oh,
so
nice.
I wanted to point out that I'm excited that you said that. She'll be happy to know that you noticed because that's her favorite part of the day.
Nice.
So my question here is, you are proposing a highly controversial program. The school committee or the staff seemingly seem divided on the issue, and a group has formed to oppose the program. You strongly believe that this new program will be highly beneficial for students. What steps would you take in this particular scenario to make sure that this program comes through?
I might believe it's the best thing that ever happened, but if I don't have the deltas on board, it's not going to matter. And so my first priority would be, how do we come to an agreement that this is something that's going to work? And how do we find a middle road that doesn't water it down to a point where it's not going to be successful, but are things we can augment or change to make that happen? So an example I'll give you with that was, we had a set of students come to us and say, we're really concerned about the literature at the high school. We feel like it's not representative of multiculturalism within our district. And the kids came to us. We didn't go to them. And I said, what are you looking for? And the kids said, we want more books that are written by authors who actually have experienced the problem. So rather than someone from the outside writing about slavery, for example, I want books about somebody who's actually experienced it and wrote about it themselves. I said, okay, to the kids. I said, let's go ahead and find a list. So they worked with the English department on that. As we worked on it, they brought forth to the school committee the list of books that they wanted to have, and the school committee voted on it. We're now, after COVID and all these other things, some people are challenging that. And so what I've said is, bring the kids back together and let them talk about why this is important and how it's impacted them. And to me, that's very important, because at the end of the day, the program wasn't Darcy Fernandes' idea. It was the kids' idea. And so the kids are the ones who are going to come forth and say, hey, this is why we wanted it, and we think it's working. And so that's one of the approaches. I think the other thing is, sometimes, how do I say it? You may have to lose a battle to win the war, and that's okay, right? So is this really the core of what we need to change, or is this something we can give in a little bit on and say, we're not going to deal with this, okay, we'll move on to something else? We've got to be open to that. I mean, masking is one of those pieces, right? We started out with all the kids with masks on, and we had a set of parents saying, we don't want that anymore, we want our kids to not have masks. We had to find a happy medium for that, and that's what we want to be able to do. And I think the other piece for me that's so important is have data to back up whatever it is you want to do. So you can't say to people, we think this is good, but not have data to back it up. You want to be able to show that it has been proven to work. So example, when we talk about inclusion, there's got to be 1,000 articles that say that special needs students benefit more being in an inclusion classroom than self-contained. I would want to bring that research forward to show the community, to understand why that decision was made and why it's so important, and then say, are there other concerns that you have? What are they? All right, let's sit down and see how we can hear each other and hear that and talk about how to fix it. I mean, I've had situations where, for religious reasons, parents didn't want their kids in certain classes. And I said, okay, then if that's not where you want them, here's an alternative that we can do for your individual child. But we're not going to shut down the whole program, right? And so that became a way to solve it. So I had a parent who was not happy. There was a controversy topic that came up, Black Lives versus Blue Lives Matters, and the kids were having the conversation. The teacher wasn't promoting either, but the parent didn't want their child exposed. So for that, the child did an independent study in the library while the class continued, and that particular child picked a topic that was controversial that they wanted to research and talk about, and gave the report to the teacher so that they were still doing the work. The parent got what they needed for their child, and the class continued. So I would hope we would be able to figure that out and work through that. I think there will be times, especially in today's community, as much as we'd like to say we can solve all these problems, we can't. But what we want to be able to do is say, is this beneficial for the majority? And if it is, be able to take a stand if we need to, with the support of the school committee and the majority of the community. If we don't have it, then we've got to sit back and say, okay, we may have to do something differently here.
Thank you.
Yeah.
And Mr. Russo.
Thank you. So over the last couple of years, and you've sort of already touched upon this a little bit, but over the last couple of years, there's been a lot of polarizing views that have emerged, specifically about parents, having a say in their child's education. What are your feelings toward this, and how will you work to ensure that parents are having their voices heard? And again, you've sort of touched upon it, so I don't know if you want to add anything further.
Sure. I think dignity is a word I use all the time. Dignity comes when you listen. What you can't do is make the decision that what they have to say isn't important. Whether it's going to be offensive to me or not should not matter. I have to be able to sit in the room and listen. And at the end of the day, be able to at least say back to them, is this what I'm hearing? Is your concern a worry? Right? If we don't agree that that's what they said, we keep talking until we at least get to agreement on what the problem is. Because oftentimes when you first listen to someone, they have a context and you have a context. So what they're saying, you may be interpreting differently than what they are. So that constant back and forth. Is this what you're saying is the problem? If they say, no, okay, can you give me an example? And back and forth until I've got it clear. Once they say we've got it clear, then I can say to them, then where are the things that we can mutually agree on? We might not agree on this whole list, but let's talk about the things we can mutually agree on, and let's see how we can move in those areas. And that's what I hope would be the way in which we would work and move forward as a team. Like I said, I think in 99% of the situations we're able to work, there's always going to be that 1 percentile. And in that case, I'm going to come back to my executive team. I may come to the school committee and say, hey, this is where we're at. This is what we've done. What are your thoughts? Is there anything else that I can approach and try? I'm not perfect, right? So to try to seek advice from others around a way to work through that. Sometimes just bringing in a third party can help. What I've done in the past, as I've said, is there a community group you respect in the community? Yeah. All right, why don't we bring them in and do a listening session together and see if we can figure it out? And sometimes that will work. So I try to be very creative, but the one thing I don't want to do is shut down the conversation. Once you shut down the conversation, it becomes very difficult to continue to respect each other. So I don't want to be in that situation. I want to try to keep it as open as possible for as long as possible.
Thank you.
Yep.
Okay, and Mr. Sullivan.
Great. Thank you, Madam Chair. Just to lay a little framework, we have 4 elementary schools here in town, kind of basically on 2 different sides of town, and they're broken up so half of our third and fourth grade students are in one school, another half of the third and fourth, and then the youngest as well. We're very fortunate we have great residents, as you cited earlier in your opening remarks, that have supported this school, supported a brand new elementary school where we're going to bring all of those early learners, second, third, and fourth graders together under one roof here within a year. So my question is, how would you successfully collaborate with stakeholders in the school community to assure a successful opening of the new school and the combining of grades 2 through 4? What considerations would you apply to the process to minimize educational impact for our students?
First and foremost, I would want to have meetings with several groups: the teachers, the administrators, and the families. And the purpose of that would be, first of all, what's your worry about the opening of the school, right? Because I got to know what they're concerned about first before I can try to work with a team to solve it. So that would be my first question. What are your worries? And then secondly, what I would want to do is to say, this is what I heard your worries are. Here's the way in which we're going to work through the process of solving them, or here's a potential solution we have. And that document that I would create, I would do with the stakeholders. So I wouldn't be doing it independently on my own. So I already talked to some teachers today about that and some of the administrators, and they said, the biggest thing for us is the unknown. I've heard that special ed over at this school does it this way, and we do it this way, and we're going to come together as one building. How are we going to work through that? And what I said to them, you got to get in a room together and talk about it. And so I would want to be able to structure time in which to have those conversations. That's extremely important. If you don't put the time together, you're going to have a mess when that building opens up the first day. Whereas everybody has a chance to talk and work through the process, that's going to be key. I don't know what your funding is. I really don't. But I would want to look at that and say, do we have money to bring these people together over the summer to talk and try to figure some of that out? If not, then how could I structure time during the school year to make that happen? So one of the things I heard was some of the staff said today, we had PD time and they said we were going to have some time to have conversations about this, and then it didn't happen. I would want them to see, here are the places when you're going to be able to have the conversation and figure this out, because that has to be the first step. If they feel like there's no place to have the conversation, I'm going to remain in the dark. And so you would want to do that. And then even once the building opened and you decided what you were going to do, I would want to have a bi-monthly meeting to say, how are things going? Because even the best laid plans go awry sometimes. And so once it starts, you want to be in there and you want to be having those conversations. When I arrived at Ethel, we had an elementary school that had opened the year before I got there. And when I got there in July, I don't like the traffic pattern. So we started working out what does that look like and how do we fix that. We revised the way that the students got dropped off, how the parents worked to drop their kids off, and we were able to solve that. So we didn't just say, because the building's open now, we're just going to let it stay the same way. We kept working at it until we've gotten it right. And that's what I would want to be able to do here, but not alone. It has to be done with the group, and we have to figure out a way to find the time to do that. And so I would want to look at your calendar. I know in Ethel, for example, we have 2 professional days before school even starts. I don't know what the plans are for that, but if this was a critical thing that needed to happen, then I would want to set aside some of that time to bring those schools together to have those conversations. Because if we're talking about, I don't know, SEL programming, no one's going to hear me if their biggest worry is what does my space going to look like in January. And so I would want to resolve that first before going in to those other pieces, because the unknown is probably what makes people so stressed out. That's why for the last few years people have been stressed out, because they don't understand and know COVID. It's the same thing with this transition.
Great, thank you.
Yep.
Okay, and next question's mine. We have received lots of feedback on the wishes of many stakeholders, which you've mentioned some of this already, to evaluate and improve on communication across the district.
Right.
Can you speak to how you have or how you intend to be a leader that seeks input, processes that information, and then communicates it back to the community?
Yes. First of all, I got to be out and about. That's the very first priority. I would hope at the end of the year, what you would hear is, we see Mrs. Fernandes all the time, not only from the staff, but from the students and from the community. That would be the first thing, because you cannot listen if you're not present with them. So that would be the first thing. I would hope the second thing that you would hear is that Mrs. Fernandes listened. Not only did she listen, she regurgitated back what she heard, and then she worked with us for a plan to fix the problem. And so I would hope that you would hear that, and you would actually see documents around that. And the other thing you would see is a memo that went out at least every other week saying, here's what I'm hearing, here's what the concerns are, here's the way we're going to work on it, here's the things that we want to celebrate that's happening in our schools. And so I would want to be able to publish that, and that would come out in the form of multiple ways. On Facebook pages, a copy written in at the desk in the offices, something where I do, I hate to use this, but I'm a historian, a fireside chat. So once a month, just getting on Zoom and saying, hey, here's what's going on, here are the things that are happening. Do you want to talk with me? I also, when I'm in Ethel, I'm part of Shining Light every other month, which is the cable station, and I go on and she just asks me any questions that at random community want to know, and I answer them. And I love that, because we have the opportunity back and forth to have those conversations. So I would want that to happen, and I would want that same thing happening with my principals, not just with me, because I cannot be the only listener. So I would want to see how are the schools structuring to do the same thing. And what I would want to do is spend part of our leadership time talking about what they're hearing and how we're going to work through some of those issues. Because the truth be told, as soon as somebody puts a label on you, superintendent, principal, blah, 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 right? There are certain people who just don't want to talk because they have trust issues, and I can understand that, right? So I've got to find a way to break that barrier. So the other thing I would want to do is if what I'm hearing versus what I'm hearing when I go to the meetings versus what I'm hearing when, you know, the mouse that comes to you and tells you something are different, then I would want to bring in somebody from the outside and let them listen to our teachers and give me a report that says, here's what we're hearing, here's where we think we want to focus. Because sometimes you just need a neutral party because you need to build that trust over time. When I was in New Bedford, that's how I started. I brought in a person from the outside, and he spent the time in the school meeting with all of my teachers, hearing what their concerns are, what their worries were. And then once he did that, we went to a faculty meeting together, and I said, this is what he's heard. Is this correct? And the teacher said yes, and then we sat down and started working on fixing those particular problems. But they didn't trust me because I was a brand new green lady who just walked in the building. And so when I asked the questions, oftentimes I was getting silence in the room. But bringing in a neutral person who I didn't know, they didn't know, all of a sudden people opened up and they were at least willing to say what those issues are. And then over time, I built enough trust that people were able to start telling me. But some cases, that's what you have to do. So we really have to see what would work best. The other thing that I do now is I do a lot of surveying. Survey Monkey is a wonderful thing. You send out a survey, and 2 days later, you have all these bar charts that tell you a bunch of things, and you have a bunch of ways in which people can make comments. So every year, I put out a survey to our parents, and I ask them, how are things going? What's working? What's not? Are you satisfied with the schools? And it isn't evaluative. It's just for us to know, because we're not perfect. We know there are things we're going to work on. But at least from that survey, I get from a lot of voices. Because I have to be careful, too, to make sure there aren't just 5 voices who are talking, representing everybody, but the truth be told, what everybody wants is different than those 5 voices. So the survey seems to help as well. And the way we do our surveys, we send out a general, but I also do random calling. So at night, people will get on the phone and call and say, we noticed you haven't filled out the survey. Would you like to take a minute to do that? And I'm happy to punch it in for you. And so they'll get the information on the families so that way we know we have a full representation of the voices from across the district before we make that decision. And so that works as well. So there are, I think, multiple ways in which to do that, but that communication back and forth has to be key.
Thank you. And then Mr. Parsons?
So these past few years have taken a toll on our school community. Several relationships between different stakeholder groups are strained. The argument can be made that these less than ideal relationships have created challenges for our families, students, educators, school staff, and residents. There is a sentiment that these relationships make the work of serving our students and community more difficult than it could be.
Right.
How will you restore relationships between stakeholder groups around the common goal of providing the best education for Tewksbury students possible?
Right. First of all, I'm going to have to be out and about. I can't just be in the schools. I'm going to have to go to things, whether it be, I don't know what some of your places are where families gather, but for example, in our community, Pop Warner is one of them, so I'd want to show up at Pop Warner. I'd want to show up at the VFW. I'd want to show up at the American Legion. Where are people, where's the norms in which they go? When I was in New Bedford, for our ELL families, it was a Puerto Rican restaurant down the street from the school. So I intentionally, every Thursday night, ate there. And I literally wouldn't just pick my food up and leave. I'd actually sit at a table and eat. And the families started realizing I was there, and they'd come in and tell me what was going on. I also went to church. I'd show up at church and I'd ask the ministers, can I have 5 minutes just to let the parents know who I am, you know, and hear from them. And then I would allow the churches, if they wanted, after the service, to go downstairs and actually talk to parents. I'd want to find out here collectively where are those places and try to be in some of those places so that people feel more comfortable talking to me and feeling connected. I would also want to do that with the staff in some fun ways. What I don't want it always to be is, okay, let's sit down and talk. how about we have a barbecue on a half day? And we have some hot dogs and we sit down and just talk, because when people are relaxed and feel comfortable, they're more likely to tell you how they're feeling than in kind of the stiff room where you feel like you're on trial. And so I would want to create some of those spaces. So an example is Friday at our school, we have an ice cream truck coming to every building. And I'll be out there. I told the kids it's wonderful for me because I'm going to have 4 ice creams in a day. But the reason why I'm out there is this is an opportunity for staff to talk to me, to students to talk to me in a non-threatening way. So we'll just start talking about, what do you like? Do you like the strawberry shortcake, or do you like the, right? And then from there, people feel comfortable and they're able to start talking. So really trying to find those places in which people feel like they're relaxed enough to really be honest and open with me and what's going on. So I would also want that to be part of some of the ways in which we begin to reconnect with all of the stakeholders, because clearly I'm hearing people feel fractured, but there's many different reasons why. It's not one thing from what I heard today. But what I also heard is everybody wanting it to be solved. There was not one person who said to me, I want to remain fragmented. And that's a very positive thing, that people were saying, I want to fix this. We need to fix this. And so that's a good starting point, because people are open to moving in a direction to fix things. And like I said, it wasn't one specific thing that people were saying. There was a lot of things they were saying that made you lead to the fact that whatever that issue happened on that day here, there were 100 things that happened before that led to that day. And we want to understand what those 100 things were. It wasn't one event that led to it, and that was very clear in talking to the staff and what they needed in order to see it get fixed.
Okay, and so we have 2 questions left. Mrs. B. Joni Smith.
Thank you.
Am I doing okay on time?
Pretty close. We have about 20 minutes. Yeah.
Okay, good.
So you touched on this a little bit when you talked about professional development and staff being able to choose what they'd like to engage in on their time. What role do you believe the staff should play in the decision-making process, and how have you involved your staff in that?
Yeah.
If you could elaborate a little bit more than
Right.
the past question.
First and foremost, there has to be a structure to allow them to communicate. And so I want to set up a structure for the staff so that they can rely on places in which to talk about what's going on. In Ethel, we have an instructional leadership team at each school and a district instructional leadership team. So the instructional leadership team meets 2 times a month. It's led by teachers with the principal. And there they talk about how things are going, what's working, what's not, how do we fix it. And then at the DIT level, they do the same thing with me as the superintendent, with the directors and the principals. And so I would want to see that structure in place. Besides that, we also have subgroups of things. So we have a committee on literacy, we have a committee on equity, we have a committee on social emotional learning, and they're also working. And so what happens is we put out an ad and saying to the teachers, if you want to work on this and help to improve this in this area, here's a place you might want to think about signing up, and they actually get paid to come and be part of that. And so that's very important. One of the teams that we have working right now is called retention and recruitment, and that was something that the union brought to me as a concern. And so I said, why don't we get together first and talk about how to solve this. So what we came up with was putting a survey together for the staff after doing research on what works in retaining and recruiting teachers. And so we came up with all these ideas that came from others. We put together a survey for staff and asked them what their thoughts were on them. And we just finished reviewing those survey results, and we found out a couple of things. We found out for some of our teachers, they just wanted the benefit of getting insurance when they started. Because with our current insurance, they can't start for 2 months. And so one of the things we've talked about now is negotiating into contracts when people come, paying their COBRA for 2 months so that they can come in and feel good. For our staff that was already there, they said, well, what if I don't take insurance? Is there a possibility to get a bonus? So we're talking now about, is there a way to give them a certain amount of money if they choose not to take the insurance within the district? That's another thing. The other thing the teachers talked about was not enough pay. We need more pay. And so we've examined the pay scale, and there are certain sections in the pay scale that we are behind. So for example, our bachelor's degree teachers coming in first year, are only making $45,000 a year. It's not enough to live on or for somebody to want to come sign up and work in our district. So we're working with the school committee now to look at that particular lane and see how we might improve in that particular lane. So not everyone, but in that area where we're off kilter with others. Some of the other recommendations were about more common planning time. So we're currently looking at how to restructure our schedule for that. So at the high school next year, we've managed to get it up to 76 minutes as a pilot. So we're going to pilot it for 1 year and see if it works. And then if it does, we'll look at augmenting the contract afterwards. But so some of the other things we're doing is what can we pilot to see if it really does make a difference, and then work through that process. The other thing that's come up is just support, general support for teachers who are new. And so putting the coaches' positions in place in our district was something our staff really wanted, but it had to be something that wasn't assigned but was voluntary. And so we don't assign a coach. What happens is if they feel they're in need of help, so if I get an evaluation and I feel like, oh, this isn't working for me, or a feedback, I can go to the coach and say, can you come in and work with me? And so we can recommend it, but we never require it. So we're working through that process. So those are some of the things. But it was working with the union and setting up that survey that was key. And at least now the union feels like, yeah, she has a sense of it. Even with COVID relief, what do we do to relieve our staff? One other thing was a little bit more money would be helpful. So we took our ESSER funds and we actually were able to give $750 to each of our staff members in the district, not just the teachers, the cafeteria workers, the custodians, everyone. And what we said was, everybody's taking a toll on COVID. We can't say Mrs. Jones has had more than Mr. Anderson, right? So what we said was, what is important is that everybody gets a bonus. So we took a chunk of the money, we divided it out by the number of staff, came to $750 each, and they all got a check. We also looked at our time on learning and realized we had 27 additional hours of time beyond what the state required. So we put in an additional 3 half days. And we said to the teachers, on those half days, you got to be in the building. But you do what you want. If you want to go in your room, put on meditation music, and meditate for 3 hours, feel free. If you want to do extra prep, whatever it is, go ahead and do it. And so we really worked out with the union some of those things that the teachers felt would bring relief. When I arrived in Ethel, one of the first things the teacher said to us is, we don't have materials to teach. That's my biggest problem. And so we've worked really hard in building that. So for example, in our literacy program, we put in place a Wonders program. And the Wonders program got put into place because the teachers selected that program they felt would work. The first year we followed it with fidelity, and now what we're doing is we're the gap areas and we're supplementing things based on that. Same thing at the middle school now. We've been looking at several textbooks in science. The teachers pick the one they like because it has some actual labs online as well as kits that come every year. So we've put that in place. But we did that as a team. I didn't sit in a room by myself trying to figure it out, nor did the science department share. We had everybody work together, and even now in Ethel, we have a 5-year rotating curriculum timeline. So every department gets reviewed every 5 years, so that way you know, okay, we got reviewed this year. For basically on year 4, we'll start talking about it. In year 5, you'll actually get the materials or whatever you request, and that way we can budget plan for it too. It's not something that ends up being, something we talk about that doesn't happen. We can actually budget and make sure the money's there to get what the teachers need.
Thank you.
Yep.
Okay, and our last of our formal questions is Mr. Russo.
Thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair. You talked a little bit about money just now, and
yep.
sort of, trying to figure out ways to give back a little bit to staff. And so with property tax going up every year in Tewksbury by approximately 2.5%, and over 60% of those funds of property tax going towards our schools, how will you work to ensure that the budget you are putting forward takes into account the level of services that Tewksbury residents in many cases have come to expect, as well as ensuring a budget that focuses on student achievement?
Yeah. First of all, I work very closely with our town manager. We meet every single month without fail. And the reason for that is to stay kind of close on what's going on with our budget and looking at ways in which we can help each other. And so we work very closely together. And besides the town manager from Ethel, we also have someone from the FinCom in Royalson who works directly with us as well. And so we meet every month and we talk about what's going on in the school, what are some of the things coming up, and how can we work at it. And it's been nice because what we've been able to do in some cases is find grant funds to take care of some of the things without fiscally killing the district. So HVAC, for example, we were able to use our ESSA funds to repair HVAC system problems that we had without tapping into the general budget and putting that on the taxpayers. Right now, we want to put in place what you have, that beautiful new track and football field. And so one of the things we're looking at is potential funding outside of the district that will help to pay for that. So we're talking about other grants that we may be able to apply to with the town. So right now, behind our high school, there's a park that the town runs that really needs a lot of work. So we're trying to find a grant where we can integrate the track with that park so that we can get the track done without bringing in more money, asking for more money for the town. So really planning ahead for that. And that's very important. It's very important. We work very closely with MSBA. That's how we've been able to get our new buildings. I know that's what you've done here. And I think the other piece of it, I think, is really about prioritizing what needs to get done. You can't do everything. We'd like to say we can, but what are the essential things that need to happen year to year? And what I work very closely with the business manager, and we always look, starting around January, how much money we got left in the coffers. Are we able to do some of those things that the community's been looking for? So, for example, at the high school, we have these tiles that are glued on in the ceiling, and they're dropping on kids' heads. They're only cardboard, but, you know, in the middle of math class, it's not working. So what we did was we talked to the principals and said, how are you for supplies? And they all said, we're in really good shape. I said, so if I cut right now, would you be okay with that? They said yes. And so we were able to come up with the money so that we can get all the tiles screwed in so we don't have that problem again. So we did that. The year before, we had extra money left over. The high school was in desperate need of new furniture. So what we did was we bought for 10 classrooms last year. We're buying for an additional 10 classrooms this year. So we're slowly getting there. But I have a priority list that stays in my office, and we punch at that list. So we have our building and maintenance team for the school committee. We work with them. What are the things that you think need to happen right away? And we prioritize that list. One of the things they wanted, which the families was asking for, was a digital sign at the high school. So we kind of chipped away at the budget during the year. We were able to find the money, and now we got this beautiful digital sign. So that's the way in which I try to work so that the taxpayers at the end don't get stuck. And we try to purchase early if we can. So I tell my curriculum people, I want to know by October what it is you need, because I'm going to try to buy it before next year's budget, so I don't have to include it. And so that's some of the things that we try to do. And I know myself. I will find the money to help you, but I also know the business manager has to tell me no at times. And so I respect that. And I really believe that I have to have a very special relationship with the business manager, because they have to be able to tell me no. And sometimes we just have to. I will never, ever say I don't need money if it's a safety issue. It just has to happen. But if there are things we can wait a year on, then we'll wait. You know, if we need to, and if that's going to alleviate the taxpayers from feeling like we're too high. So this year, right now, let me make sure I've got my numbers right. The high school, the Ethel Royalston's money went up 1.99%. Every year we've been able to stay under 2 for the most part. And so that's been good. And that 1.99 includes the money that we've had to put in for our MSBA project. So it's not separate. That's all part of that. And so it's been good. And so we work very closely. I'm a taxpayer too, and I know what it feels like when my taxes go up. So I try to work very closely on making sure that we're not overspending, but also getting what the kids need. And walking around the district, I think there are some things that are needed. But what I'm noticing is you're chipping away at it. You know, you've got some, some of these buildings are older. You need to get rid of them and put the new ones in, and you're doing that. But we have to pace ourselves to make that happen. And that's what I think makes a difference when you look at something fiscally for a district.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you. Does anybody have a follow-up question that they'd like to ask? We have maybe 10 more minutes, so.
Can I just have a minute just like processing?
I have a question, and I apologize to my colleague.
No worries.
It's on your initial question. But I'm really intrigued by this, to quite honestly, with the CSD teams.
Yes.
How do you find parents receptive to that? Because obviously, you know, with so much
Right.
statute-driven stuff surrounding, you know, individual learning plans.
Right.
Maybe you could just explain that a little bit more
Sure.
to me, please?
First of all, what a parent wants is their kid to be successful. And so why they're responding to the CST teams in a positive way is because they're seeing change in their child. And that's what you want to have happen. And so that's why we're seeing some benefits. Also in the district, I have one person who's in charge of the CST teams. So she goes to each of the meetings at each of the schools to help as we get it going. That job will eventually go away. We used SR funds to put that position in place so that we could make sure everybody was orientated and understood it well. And so she is called our Director of Intervention and Acceleration. And so she works directly with the CST teams to help orientate them and understand how the process should work. And what's been interesting is there was resistance in the beginning, especially from the teachers, like, no, we just want the kid out of the classroom. But what teachers found was with the cycle and the way it works, they were able to see that, yeah, I can put some things in place in my classroom that will work. But on top of that, we have resources that we've put in place. So, for example, we didn't have a BCBA before. We now have one. And so she will go in. So with some of those CST teams, she's actually going in the room and helping the teacher to put the intervention in place. Because some of it isn't the teacher doesn't want to do it. They don't understand how to do it. So she'll go in and actually work with that teacher until they get it with fidelity, and then she'll move on to another class. Because we have to realize that an intervention, just because it's an intervention doesn't mean the teacher has expertise in it, right? So we provide some of that help through the BCBA, through the coaches, as a way in which to help build that. I would say to you, yeah, we still have some parents who know I want to go to the IEP process, and if that's what they want, that's what we do if we can't show or demonstrate that the child's improving. And not every time does it work, but more times than not, and we're starting to see the numbers come down. When I arrived in Ethel, we were about 29% of our kids in special ed. We're at about 26 now. 26%, it's not great, but fiscally it's much better than we were. And so we continue to work at it, and we are starting to see, again, those numbers come down because of that. But what we don't do, and I want to make sure the public hears this, we don't sacrifice a child for it. If the child's not getting what we need, then we got to go to the IEP process. Right. But what we're trying to do is use the resources we currently have to get that child what they need without having to put them on an IEP. Right. That's the goal. What we come to realize is, example, some parents think Title I is a special ed program. It is not. Getting reading support for your child, you can get. They don't need to be on an IEP to get it. And some of our parents don't realize that. So once their kid gets referred to Title I and they start getting the reading support, they realize they don't need the child to be on an IEP. Right now we have some math interventionists, and so kids who are struggling with math, once they get the intervention over a period of time, the parents seeing them growing, they're going, okay, maybe they don't need the IEP. And so it's not just about the meeting. It's about putting in place the action and ensuring it's making a difference for the child. That's why the parents and teachers are on board, because they're seeing change. But if that change isn't happening, then yeah, we've got to go to the IEP process.
Great, thank you for that clarity, I appreciate it.
No problem, no problem.
Actually, just on the same question, so just what, how many students in Ethel are receiving supports and going through this process, the continuous services?
I would say to you that we just started this process this year. At the end of the year, we'll probably have the data. I can't tell you that now, but what I can say is we're seeing a slowdown in the overall number of referrals for special ed. We definitely are. We're not seeing nearly the numbers we did before. But it is not just because of the CST teams. It's also because we've put in place special ed coordinators, one at the secondary level and one at the elementary level. And so they're spending a lot of time with the family. So when they come for a referral, they're really digging deep with the family. What is the issue? What are some of the problems? How can we be supportive in the interim while we're going through testing? And so the parents are starting to trust them more. There was a lot of distrust to start with. And the reason why there was distrust is we didn't have a clear process in place. And so the parents felt like their kids were falling through the cracks. We now have a much better process, and so they're feeling more comfortable with that. And we also have assistant principals. Some of our assistant principals have special ed background, so we're making sure that's in place too, so that when they're working with a kid who's struggling, they understand the disability, so it doesn't become a power struggle between the adult and them. And we've put in place more adjustment counselors, so that sometimes we have adjustment counselors who do check-ins throughout the day for a child. We have some of the kids have break cards, and they get to go down and see the adjustment counselor at this time, and it makes a big difference for them. So we try multiple different things for our students, and we value and understand they have individual needs, and we've got to support those individual needs.
Great. Yep. And, how many students are in Ethel Royalson?
There's 1,560 is the number I want to give you. And I know that sounds small, but please understand that I worked in Brockton, over 30,000 kids, and in New Bedford with over 25,000 kids. So I've gotten a little bit of everything as far as size is concerned.
And so I'm just thinking scalability of this process is it's great. It's detailed. There's a lot of work and steps. Is scalability something you feel confident with?
For me or for the staff?
Both.
Okay. For me, I feel like I have a much better handle than when I first started in being an administrator. So I really got orientated by a woman by the name of Dr. Harris, who's a nationally known person who works with special ed, who came in and worked with me to help restructure the program in New Bedford. And so that's really helped me to have a better understanding of it. What I would want to do when it comes here is we've got to have professional development. I can't put a structure together and not have professional development to go along with it, because then the structure is not going to work. And so we would have to go through a process of making sure the PD was in place. What I would want to know is who can and who understands this process. So example, today I was meeting with one of the teachers, and she's been a special ed educator for over 20 some odd years. Is she someone we can use to help kickstart the CST program within our building? So I'd want to know and understand who are those people who already understand these processes, and how do we coalesce them in to become the leaders within that building as part of what they do. So it's not a whole new position, but it's a stipend position for $1,800 a year or whatever to make it work. So I would want to look at that, and then what I would want to do is bring in somebody to orientate them all so that they understood the CST process well enough so that they could run it within their building.
Great.
Yeah.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay, so we're pretty close to the end, but I just want to give you an opportunity to have a brief question if you have one.
I do. Actually, it just sort of builds off something that Mr. Parsons said, because I think you shared a lot about how you want to take input from all stakeholders, families, staff, et cetera. And I applaud that personally. I really think that's important. So now you double the district, if you will, sort of, to Tewksbury, where we're about 3,500 students, plus or minus. Sort of how do you really take into account all of those needs to then scale, right? Because you're going to have 35 different sets of opinions and hundreds of different sets of teacher opinions, staff opinions. I mean, there's only so many hours in the day. You're only one person. How do you really manage through that?
Right. I think it's the way, if you ever get a chance, and I hope you would, if I became superintendent, you'd come and watch my meetings and see how we pare things down. Okay. And so I have a process that I use to do that. So for example, when we're looking at our strategic plan, what I start with our staff often is, let's take a look. What have we been able to really get going and what hasn't? And so people will pull out the stuff we're doing and really are working and what isn't, and then we start chipping away. Do we still need all this stuff? What can we peel off the plate that we don't need? And then what's left, and how do we work on that? I wouldn't be doing it alone. If I'm doing it alone, there's a problem. I would be doing it with that team. So yeah, we would have 35 opinions. But within the room, there would be 20, 30 people saying, okay, how do we pare these 35 down? What is going to be the priority amongst the 35? And so it might be, these are what I heard from the community. Here's a survey for you. Tell me your top 3. Because I can't do them all. Right. And then I would want to begin working on those top 3. And so that's part of the process. And I will tell you this. To me, it doesn't matter if we have 5 schools or 30 schools. The process is the same. What would be different here, the only difference that I see is I would have to work with some of the admin assistants within the building to help make sure those things got out and got back, and help them, teach them how to tally so that we're getting summaries from them. Same thing when I go to the schools. What I would want to be able to do is have somebody who's kind of taking notes, and then somebody to actually categorize what they hear. So for example, there's a program out there called Hyper Research, and what it does is it takes all this narrative that people have given you, you put it in and it starts telling you what the common themes are that are coming out of that. So I would use that, and so it wouldn't matter if I had 5 answers or 500. It would begin to be able to spit out for me kind of what are the commonalities that are coming from it. So that would be something that I could use to help. Like I said, we use SurveyMonkey and Google Survey, and that takes all of my survey results and puts it into bar graphs so I can see very quickly what are some of those things. So that would all be part of it. With the DILT team, what I've done is times, you have your surveys from your school, what are they saying? And they dig in the data and they report out to me, here's what I'm hearing. And I've got to trust my staff to be able to do that. I can't do that by myself. I would say to you, I'm not intimidated at all about the school district being larger. I would say it's still fairly small in comparison to a lot of districts, right? And so, I mean, today I visited everybody but 2 of your schools in a half a day. And so I know it's more than doable because I have all week. I don't just have one day, right? And if I'm smart, I'm going to schedule. One of the things I'm very good at, you'll look at my schedule and you'll see, you know, Dewey today, Ryan tomorrow, and I have a block of time scheduled out, and the principals know when it is. I don't believe in surprises. I'm not going to just show up at your door and say, hey, I'm here. They know I'm coming, and they know what day and what time, and the staff do too. And I want it to be that transparent. And so that's one of the ways in which you manage this is you've got to be able to put together a schedule. So when I get here in July, I'll have that schedule in before I even start. Because what I don't want to do is try to schedule it afterwards, because once I do, then everything gets in the way.
Yeah, sure.
And then you can't make it happen. And so you've got to schedule from the beginning.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Appreciate it.
Are you all set for wrap? Okay. So I think at this time, because we are a little bit over, if you wanted to take an opportunity to just, you know, kind of some closing remarks, I think that would be great.
Okay. I'll try to be as quick as I can because I understand you got children and I got children. But what I want to say to you is this. One, I've really been impressed by your school district today. There's no doubt about it. I've enjoyed talking to people. I have felt like there's a connection that we have, commonalities that have come up today, people who have had family members who work in the districts I've been in before, some people who have children my age, whatever it might be. I really felt that today, and I felt welcomed, and to me that's very important. If I'm going to work in a district, I want to feel like the people I'm going to work with want me here, and I felt that today. I would also say to you, if I become superintendent of the district, my number one priority from what I'm hearing from you is repairing what people feel like is broken and doing that in a manner where I'm listening and responding. That would be my first priority. In addition to that, I would want to work very closely with the school committee. Right now, I have subcommittee meetings that I attend with our school committee members, and they're very important because I think that's where we can really dig into stuff, into some detailed stuff. So I would hope that we could talk maybe about some of that, and doing some subcommittees as a way to coalesce together and figure out some of these problems. And I also will tell you, I'm going to give you 150%. I'm not a lady who comes in and says, I'm here, but by the way, you'll see my car out the parking lot at 3:30. That's not who I am. I'm going to give you 100%, 150%, and on top of that, I'm going to be committed to being here over the long haul. I'm not somebody who's a one-year wonder. I'm not interested in that, and if that's what you're interested in, don't hire me. That's what I would say. I want to be here. I have 10 years left before I retire, and I want to be committed to the place in which I get selected to be in over that long haul. And I also want to be in a place where we can be transparent with each other. And you can say to me, hey, Darcy, you know, this is working, but we need you to do more here. And I want us to have that open relationship so that we can get to a place where we do what's best and right for children. It's that simple. That's how I work. Everything has to be about kids. If you can rationalize and explain to me that it's going to be better for kids, okay. If you're rationalizing and explaining it to me and it's not going to be better for kids, we may not get to the same place. We're going to have to work a little harder at it. But that's always my first priority. And I will tell you one thing I've learned in the short time I'm here is your kids are happy, and that makes me happy. It's a good way to start.
Thank you so much.
No problem.
It's been really great listening
Yep.
to you, and thank you for joining us. And
Yep.
I guess that would be it. Is there a motion to,
Yep.
future school committee dates? April 28th, 2022, we have a special school committee meeting for a superintendent interview. On May 3rd, 2022, we have a special school committee meeting for a superintendent interview. And on May 5th, 2022, we have a special school committee meeting with deliberations and vote. Do I have a motion to adjourn?
I'll make that motion.
A second?
I'll second.
All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
No opposed. Motion passes, and we are adjourned.